On a scorching day at Westpoint Police Academy, the air shimmered above the firing range. Recruit Sarah Mercer stood out, not just for her perfect scores, but for questioning outdated protocols that the old guard clung to like gospel. Instructor Sergeant Walsh handed her a pistol with a knowing smirk. It was the range's infamous junker. Bent sights, worn spring, chipped extractor. A weapon designed to fail. The other recruits exchanged glances, recognizing the ritual humiliation about to unfold. But as Sarah inspected the weapon, her expression didn't falter. Her grandfather had taught her to shoot with worse on their rural Kentucky farm. The sergeant's smile faded as Sarah calmly adjusted the sight with a dime from her pocket. What would happen when a system built on breaking spirits meets someone who refuses to break? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah Mercer absently touched the pocket watch tucked in her uniform pocket as she cleaned her workspace at the end of the day. The tarnished brass timepiece had belonged to her grandfather, a man who'd taught her more about life than anyone else. A tool is only as good as the hand that holds it, he would say, guiding her small fingers around the grip of his old hunting rifle when she was just 8. The academy barracks were quiet as most recruits had gone to the mess hall. Sarah preferred this solitude, these moments where she could breathe without the weight of scrutiny pressing down on her shoulders. At 32, she was older than most recruits, her face bearing lines of experience that her classmates lacked. After 10 years as a military mechanic, she knew machines, how they worked, how they failed, how to coax life back into metal that others deemed worthless. The pocket watch had stopped telling time years ago, but Sarah kept it close. Like many things in her life, its value wasn't in perfect function but in what it represented. Resilience, history, a connection to something deeper than appearance. Still polishing that old thing? Maya dropped her bag on the adjacent bunk. Her roommate was the closest thing Sarah had to a friend at Westpoint Police Academy, a former emergency dispatcher with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. Just thinking, Sarah replied. About the range today? Girl, you should have seen Walsh's face when you hit that last target. Maya grinned. Man looked like he'd swallowed a toad. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The junker pistol sat disassembled on her desk, each piece meticulously cleaned despite its irreparable flaws. She had been methodically documenting every defect, photographing the bent sight, the worn spring, the chipped extractor. It wasn't about showing him up, Sarah said, though part of her had indeed savored the moment. Sure it wasn't. Maya dropped her voice. But between us, he deserved it. Walsh has been pulling that stunt for years. Breaks people who don't fit his mold. Sarah's thoughts drifted to her brother, Michael. 5 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit because officers cut corners, because procedure mattered more than truth. She hadn't told anyone at the academy why she'd left her military career. Why, at 32, she'd started over in a system she didn't trust but desperately wanted to change. Word spreading, Maya continued. Daniel from Squad 3 asked if you'd help him with weapon maintenance this weekend. Sarah nodded, unsurprised. Daniel was one of the few male recruits who'd treated her with respect from day one, recognizing her expertise without threatened posturing. The mess hall bell rang, signaling dinner service was ending. Sarah reassembled the junker with practiced efficiency, each movement automatic. You coming? Maya asked, heading for the door. I'll catch up. After Maya left, Sarah opened her desk drawer and pulled out her journal. She'd been meticulously documenting everything since arriving at the academy 3 months ago. The subtle discriminations, the accidental equipment failures assigned to female and minority recruits, the pattern too consistent to be coincidence. From her window, she could see Range Master Jenkins crossing the quad. Unlike Walsh, the older man had never shown bias, treating every recruit with the same gruff efficiency. Today, after everyone had left, she'd caught him examining the junker, his weathered face unreadable. When he noticed her watching, he'd given her a single, almost imperceptible nod before returning the weapon to the rack. Sarah tucked her grandfather's watch back into her pocket. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more barriers, more attempts to break her resolve. But as her grandfather used to say when teaching her to shoot with that old rifle on their Kentucky farm, aim true, stand firm, and remember, the target doesn't move unless you let it. The Academy rulebook sat open on Sarah's desk, its pages worn thin from generations of recruits. Section 17.3 outlined the protocol for community engagement during domestic disturbances. Procedures unchanged since 1982. Sarah had circled 3 paragraphs and added sticky notes with citations from more current research. The problem with this approach, she said, standing at attention in Lieutenant Rivera's classroom, is that it assumes immediate compliance based on authority presence alone. Current data shows that de-escalation techniques focused on Recruit Mercer. Captain Harrison interrupted from the doorway, his arrival unannounced. Is there a reason you're rewriting our curriculum? The classroom fell silent. Lieutenant Rivera, a newer instructor with progressive leanings, tensed visibly. Sir, I'm not rewriting anything, Sarah responded evenly. I'm contextualizing the protocol with updated research from the Justice Department's 2023 study on the protocols in that book. Harrison cut her off again. Have produced officers for 4 decades. Officers who know their place in the chain of command. His gaze swept the room. Class dismissed. Lieutenant Rivera. A word. As recruits filed out, Sarah caught Rivera's apologetic glance. She'd put him in a difficult position. Again, you just can't help yourself, can you? Daniel murmured as they walked toward the physical training field. Don't get me wrong, you're right about the protocols. But picking these fights. Who said I'm picking fights? Sarah adjusted her gym bag. I'm doing what we're supposed to do. Think critically about law enforcement methodology. Daniel laughed softly. In theory, maybe. In practice, this place runs on tradition and hierarchy. The afternoon sun beat down as they joined other recruits for obstacle course training. Sergeant Walsh stood with his clipboard, a smirk forming when he spotted Sarah. Mercer, front and center. Sarah jogged forward, standing at attention. Since you have so much energy for classroom debates, you can demonstrate the course. Full gear, double time. Standard punishment. Sarah had been expecting it since the classroom incident. Without comment, she strapped on the 30-pound vest while Walsh continued. The Academy rulebook exists for a reason, recruits. It represents the collective wisdom of generations of officers. Questioning it means questioning every officer who came before you. Sarah adjusted her gear, mind flashing to her 3 a.m. phone call with her grandfather last week. I'm not sure I belong here, she had confessed in a rare moment of doubt. That's exactly why you do belong, he'd answered. Systems don't change unless someone asks the uncomfortable questions. Walsh blew his whistle. Begin. Sarah attacked the course methodically, conserving energy where possible, pushing through the wall climb, rope descent, and crawl section. Her muscles burned, but she maintained steady progress. From the corner of her eye, she noticed Commissioner Davis observing from the administration building window. The academy director rarely involved himself in daily training, but rumors suggested he was feeling pressure about the program's 78% male graduation rate. Finishing the course, Sarah returned to formation, breathing hard but composed. Walsh's expression remained stony. She'd completed the punishment without complaint or failure. Acceptable, he said flatly. Connor, you're next. As training continued, Lieutenant Rivera appeared briefly at the field's edge, catching Sarah's eye. He gave a subtle nod before disappearing back toward the administrative offices. Later, showering after PT, Sarah overheard 2 female recruits talking. Said she actually fixed that old junker pistol yesterday. Walsh must have been furious. Word is, she documented everything in the range log. Called it deliberate equipment sabotage. Sarah smiled to herself. News traveled fast at the academy. Good. Let them know she wouldn't be bullied into failure or silence. The system wanted conformity above all obedience without question. But Sarah hadn't come here to conform. She'd come to transform. The range log book sat open before Sarah, its grid-lined pages documenting every weapon checked out, every malfunction reported, every round fired. With methodical precision, she recorded the date, time, and her badge number before detailing the junker pistol's defects. Weapon number 447 issued with the following pre-existing conditions. Bent rear sight, approximate 3 degrees right deviation, worn magazine spring causing feed failures, chipped extractor resulting in ejection malfunctions. You're really doing this? Maya stood beside her, nervousness evident in her voice. Just following protocol, Sarah replied, continuing to write. Section 8.5 of the Range Safety Manual requires documentation of all weapon malfunctions. You know that's not what I mean. Sarah finished her entry, adding, issued by Sergeant Walsh despite verbal notification of my awareness of these defects. Weapon was field-adjusted and functioned sufficiently to complete qualification course with score of 98 out of 100. She signed her name with a steady hand. This wasn't impulse or revenge. It was a deliberate step. The log was an official record, consulted during safety inspections and audits. What had happened yesterday couldn't be dismissed as hearsay once documented. Mercer. Range Master Jenkins appeared beside them, his face unreadable. A word. Sarah followed him to his small office adjacent to the range, a space smelling of gun oil and coffee. Jenkins closed the door, then surprised her by offering a seat. That was quite a show yesterday. His voice remained neutral, professional. Sir, he raised a hand. I've been range master here for 22 years. Seen a lot of recruits come through. Some exceptional shooters. Some who couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. He paused. Never seen someone do what you did with that junker. Sarah remained silent, waiting. That weapon, Jenkins continued, has been in rotation for 3 years. Has a history of being assigned to certain recruits. Recruits like me, Sarah stated. Jenkins didn't confirm or deny. Instead, he pulled out a maintenance record. This is the repair request I filed for that pistol 18 months ago. Notice anything? Sarah scanned the document. The issues she documented, bent sight, worn spring, chipped extractor, were all listed, with recommendations for replacement or repair. It was never fixed, she observed. Budget constraints, Jenkins said, his tone making clear what he thought of that excuse. I was instructed to keep it in limited rotation for training purposes. The implication hung in the air. The weapon wasn't just neglected, it was deliberately kept in service. Sir, why are you showing me this? Jenkins reclaimed the document. I believe in the Academy's mission, Mercer. But I don't believe in stacking the deck against good recruits. He met her gaze directly. The qualification scores go to the review board next week. Your entry in the log will be seen. Sarah understood. Her documentation would coincide with official qualification records, making the deliberate sabotage impossible to ignore. What happens now? She asked. Now? Jenkins almost smiled. Now you keep your head down and prepare for backlash. What you did wasn't just embarrassing to Walsh. It highlighted a systemic problem. As Sarah left, she noticed Sergeant Walsh and Captain Harrison across the quad, heads together in intense conversation. Walsh glanced up, his expression darkening when he spotted her. The range logbook would be seen by review officials, but the confrontation was already beginning. Sarah had forced accountability into a system designed to avoid it. The entry wasn't just about one faulty weapon. It was about exposing a pattern of institutional discrimination disguised as weeding out the weak. Back in her barracks, Sarah called her grandfather. Did what you taught me, she said when he answered. Fixed what I could. Documented what I couldn't. Proud of you, Sadie, came his weathered voice. Remember what comes next, though. When you challenge a broken system, be prepared for it to fight back, she finished. I know, Grandpa. I'm ready. The manila folder lay open on Sarah's desk, its contents spread in a careful grid. Anonymous complaint letters, photocopies provided discreetly by Lieutenant Rivera, dated back 3 years. Each described similar experiences. Female recruits and minorities assigned faulty equipment, subjected to excessive scrutiny, evaluated by different standards. He could lose his job for giving you these? Maya whispered, glancing nervously at the door. "He knows," Sarah replied, organizing the letters chronologically. "That's why he removed identifying information. The complaints formed a pattern too consistent to be coincidence. What happened with the Junker pistol wasn't an isolated incident. It was standard procedure disguised as extra challenge for recruits deemed undesirable." A knock interrupted them. Daniel entered, closing the door quickly. "Walsh is on the warpath," he reported. "Review board asked questions about the range log entry. He's telling everyone you're making false accusations." Sarah nodded, unsurprised. "And the other instructors?" "Split. Some think you're causing unnecessary trouble. Others—" Daniel hesitated. "Let's just say there are quiet conversations happening." 3 days had passed since Sarah documented the Junker pistol incident. The Academy had responded with an internal review, a process many viewed as bureaucratic theater designed to protect the institution rather than address problems. "They're calling it an equipment allocation review," Daniel continued. "Commissioner Davis is personally overseeing it." "Political damage control," Sarah said, gesturing to the complaint letters. "This has been happening for years. Look at these dates. Same patterns, same instructors named." "How many complaints?" Maya asked. 23 that Rivera could find. All dismissed or buried as unsubstantiated. Daniel picked up one letter, scanning its contents. "Female recruit assigned defective radio during emergency response drill, resulting in failure." This is from last year's class. Sarah had spent her evening connecting incidents, names, and outcomes. Of the 23 complainants, 17 left the academy within weeks. The system worked as designed, it drove them out. A sharp series of knocks interrupted them. Daniel quickly helped gather the documents as Sarah slid them into a folder and under her mattress. Captain Harrison entered without waiting for a response. "Recruit Mercer. PT field now. Full gear." "Sir, evening PT isn't scheduled." "That wasn't a request, recruit." Sarah followed him outside, where Sergeant Walsh waited with a stopwatch. The obstacle course had been modified, now featuring additional barriers and a mud pit that hadn't been there that morning. "Since you're so exceptional," Walsh said, voice dripping with sarcasm, "we've prepared a special evaluation course. Commissioner wants documentation of your remarkable abilities." Sarah recognized the trap immediately. This wasn't standard training, it was retribution designed to exhaust and humiliate her, with just enough procedural cover to claim legitimacy. "The course record is 18 minutes, Walsh continued. "You'll need to beat that to receive a satisfactory evaluation." Sarah knew the regular course record was 22 minutes. This modified version would be significantly harder. "Permission to remove my watch, sir?" she asked calmly. Walsh smirked. "Worried about the time, Mercer?" "No, sir. About damaging my grandfather's watch in the mud pit." Something flickered across Walsh's face. Annoyance that she wasn't showing fear. Sarah handed her pocket watch to a nearby recruit, ignoring the small crowd gathering to witness her expected failure. As she took position at the starting line, Sarah noticed Lieutenant Rivera observing from the administration building, his expression troubled. Near him stood Commissioner Davis, arms crossed, watching with clinical interest. "Begin," Walsh barked, starting his timer. Sarah approached the course methodically, conserving energy for the more difficult sections. She'd endured worse in military training, forced marches with heavier packs, obstacle courses designed by instructors who'd seen actual combat. Halfway through, muscles burning but form still disciplined, she heard Walsh mutter to Harrison, "She's stubborn. I'll give her that." Sarah allowed herself a grim smile as she scaled the rope climb. They'd designed this punishment assuming physical exhaustion would break her resolve. They still didn't understand what they were dealing with. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her mind. "When they raise the bar to make you fail, use it as a chance to show what you're really made of." Sarah's journal lay open on her lap, the pages filled with meticulous notes, timestamps, and observations. She'd started keeping it her first day at the academy, initially as a personal record, now as evidence. Tonight's entry detailed her completion of Walsh's special obstacle course in 1742, beating the supposed record and denying him the satisfaction of her failure. The expression on Walsh's face, she wrote, wasn't anger but fear. He's realizing traditional methods of breaking recruits won't work on me. A knock interrupted her writing. Sarah closed the journal, sliding it under her pillow before opening the door. A middle-aged man in a crisp suit stood there, Academy visitor badge clipped to his lapel. Recruit Mercer? Frank Donovan, police union representative. May I have a moment? Sarah let him in, immediately noting his carefully neutral expression. I'll be direct, Donovan said after declining a seat. Your documentation in the range log has triggered formal review procedures. While the union supports proper reporting of equipment issues, there's concern about the characterization of events. You mean my noting that the weapon was deliberately assigned to me despite known defects? Donovan's expression tightened. Such claims require substantial evidence. The Academy has a distinguished history of systematically driving out recruits who don't fit the traditional mold, Sarah finished. I'm aware of the history, Mr. Donovan. You're making serious accusations against decorated officers. Recruit Mercer. Consider the implications for your career. Law enforcement is a brotherhood and sisterhood, Sarah added pointedly. Donovan sighed. I'm here as a courtesy. These situations can be resolved discreetly. A transfer to another academy, perhaps. Your record remains unblemished. Everyone saves face. Sarah studied him. Who sent you? Walsh? Harrison? Or higher up? I'm here on behalf of members concerned about unnecessary disruption to the training environment. Translation. The old guard was offering her an exit ramp. Disappear, drop the complaints, maintain the status quo. The same offer likely extended to those 23 previous complainants. Thank you for your concern, Sarah said evenly. But I'm exactly where I need to be. After Donovan left, Sarah retrieved her journal, adding this new development to her timeline of events. The tactical driving course was tomorrow, another opportunity for them to engineer her failure. Her phone vibrated with a text from Daniel. Heads up, they're messing with car assignments for tomorrow. Sarah wasn't surprised. She texted back, thanks. Sleep well. Morning arrived with clear skies and mounting tension. The tactical driving course, a series of precision maneuvers at varying speeds, was a critical evaluation. Failure rates historically hovered around 15%, disproportionately affecting female recruits. Sarah performed her usual pre-test inspection of her assigned vehicle, a habit from her military days. The other recruits had already started their engines, but something about the brake pedal's resistance felt wrong. She knelt to check beneath the dashboard. Problem, Recruit Mercer? Walsh appeared beside her, clipboard in hand. Brake line shows signs of seepage, sir. Sarah pointed to the dampness near the master cylinder. Safety protocol requires inspection before operation. Walsh's jaw tightened. Perhaps you'd prefer a different vehicle? Standard procedure is to report the safety issue and request maintenance evaluation, Sarah replied, pulling out the vehicle inspection form. I'm documenting the hydraulic fluid seepage as required by Section 12.4 of the Motor Pool Regulations. Several recruits had stopped to watch the exchange. Walsh's plan, likely to have her fail spectacularly with compromised brakes, was backfiring in front of witnesses. Maintenance can review it later. Take Vehicle 14 instead, Walsh ordered, walking away stiffly. As Sarah moved her gear to the replacement vehicle, Lieutenant Rivera approached under the pretense of checking the course layout. Smart catch, he murmured. Document everything. Already am, Sarah replied quietly. Rivera hesitated. They're escalating because you're succeeding. Be careful. There's more at stake here than most realize. Sarah nodded, understanding the subtext. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about exposing a system that had been undermining qualified recruits for years. Vehicle 14 performed flawlessly as Sarah executed each maneuver with precision. She placed third overall, a strong showing that gave Walsh no ammunition for criticism. Later, reviewing her journal entries from the past week, Sarah recognized the pattern forming. Each attempt to break her was strengthening her case, creating a documented trail of deliberate sabotage and discrimination. "They don't realize," she wrote, "that every obstacle they place in my way becomes evidence for the very case they're trying to bury." The USB drive felt small in Sarah's palm, its black plastic casing unmarked. Amber Chun from IT support had slipped it to her during the mandatory computer training session, whispering, "Security footage from the range. Delete after viewing." Sarah understood the risk Amber had taken. Academy security footage was strictly controlled. Accessing it without authorization was grounds for termination. Back in her room, Sarah plugged the drive into her laptop. The video showed the firing range from the previous week, the day of the Junker pistol incident. She watched as Walsh conferred with Harrison, both men glancing toward her before Walsh selected the weapon from the rack. Their body language confirmed what she already knew. The assignment had been deliberate. More damning was what came after. The footage showed Walsh demonstrating the weapon to a group of male recruits later that day, highlighting Sarah's adjustments. "Even with a piece of junk, Mercer managed to shoot straight," he admitted, sounding almost impressed despite himself. "Goes to show it's the shooter, not the equipment." This wasn't just evidence of discrimination. It was Walsh acknowledging her skill while continuing to use the sabotaged weapon for instruction. A knock startled Sarah. She quickly ejected the drive and tucked it into her pocket before opening the door. Maya stood there, uncharacteristically tense. "Can we talk?" "Not here." They walked to the quiet area behind the gymnasium, away from security cameras. "I need to tell you something," Maya said, voice low. "Harrison's been asking me questions about you. Detailed questions. What you do after hours, who you talk to, if you've been accessing Academy records." Sarah had suspected Maya might be approached as her roommate. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing useful." Maya looked away. "But Sarah, I've been reporting to him for weeks. Not by choice. He implied my evaluation scores could suffer if I didn't." The revelation stung, but Sarah wasn't surprised. "You're doing what you need to survive the Academy." "I'm done with it," Maya said firmly. "I told him this morning I wouldn't be his informant anymore. He wasn't happy." Sarah squeezed her friend's shoulder. "That took courage." "Not compared to what you're doing." Maya hesitated. "There's more. Officer Gaines wants to meet you. Graduated last year, works patrol now. Says she experienced similar issues." "Where and when?" "Tomorrow, 1900 hours. Coffee shop 3 blocks east." As they walked back, Sarah spotted Lieutenant Rivera leaving Commissioner Davis's office, his expression troubled. Their eyes met briefly, Rivera giving a nearly imperceptible shake of his head. A warning. Midterm evaluations arrived the following day. Sarah scored highest in her class on tactical knowledge, firearms proficiency, and emergency response protocols. Yet her leadership potential and adaptability scores were suspiciously low. "Recruit demonstrates resistance to established methodologies and questions authority inappropriately," Harrison had written. "Technical proficiency does not compensate for attitudinal concerns." Sarah filed the evaluation in her growing documentation. The pattern was consistent: excellence in measurable skills, subjective criticism of her attitude. That evening, Sarah met Officer Elena Gaines at the coffee shop. The young patrol officer was nervous but determined. "I graduated despite them, not because of them," Gaines explained, describing similar experiences with equipment malfunctions and biased evaluations. 3 women started in my class. Only I finished." "Did you report it?" Sarah asked. "Tried to. My complaint disappeared into administrative limbo." Gaines leaned forward. "But I kept copies. And I wasn't the only one. There's a network of us, graduates who experienced the same treatment. We've been documenting for years, hoping someone would finally force the issue." Sarah felt a surge of validation. "How many?" "Dozens. Mostly women, people of color, LGBTQ recruits. Anyone who didn't fit the traditional mold." Gaines slid a flash drive across the table. Performance statistics for the past 5 years, broken down demographically. Lieutenant Rivera helped compile it. Shows clear patterns of biased evaluations. The pieces were falling into place. This wasn't just about Sarah, or even the current class. It was institutional, systematic, spanning years. Why hasn't this come to light before? Sarah asked. Fear, Gaines said simply. Fear of retaliation, of career suicide. Law enforcement can be tribal. Cross the wrong people, you get labeled a troublemaker. No one has your back on patrol. It's dangerous. Sarah understood. She was challenging not just individual instructors but an entrenched culture. What made you decide to come forward? Now? Gaines smiled slightly. Word travels. A recruit who fixed a junker pistol and hit every target? Who documents everything and refuses to back down? Maybe you're the catalyst we've been waiting for. The wall of fame photographs lined the main corridor of the administration building. Class after class of academy graduates dating back to 1967. Sarah stood before them during her lunch break, noting the obvious pattern. The early classes were entirely white and male. Women began appearing in the late 1970s, usually one per class, rarely more than two. Racial diversity increased marginally in the 1990s but remained disproportionately low. Quite a legacy, isn't it? Range Master Jenkins appeared beside her, voice neutral. A telling one, Sarah replied. The academy's been around for 58 years, but you'd never know we're in a diverse city looking at these photos. Jenkins nodded slightly. Ever wonder why there's a gap in the display? Between 1993 and 1995. Sarah examined the wall more carefully, noticing the missing years. Fire damage, Jenkins said. At least that's the official story. Happened before my time. And unofficially? Jenkins lowered his voice. That was Commissioner Davis's class. Rumor has it was the most diverse in academy history. Special recruitment initiative. Almost 40% women and minorities. What happened to them? Good question. Worth looking into those graduates' current status. Jenkins walked away as Captain Harrison rounded the corner. Sarah filed the information away. Another thread to pull. That afternoon, she gathered with the small group that had formed around her. Maya, Daniel, and 3 other recruits who'd experienced targeted difficulties. They met in the quiet corner of the library, ostensibly as a study group. Equipment failures during practical exams, said Amir, a recruit of Middle Eastern descent. Communications gear that mysteriously malfunctions only when I'm using it. Excessive scrutiny of my written work, added Taylor, a transgender recruit. Same answers as others. Marked wrong on my paper, correct on theirs. Sarah listened, recognizing the patterns. We need to document everything systematically. Dates, times, witnesses, specifics of each incident. Is it worth it? Amir asked. They're just going to bury it like they've always done. Not this time, Sarah replied. Not if we work together. One complaint is easy to dismiss. 5, 10, 20 coordinated complaints with documented evidence is harder to ignore. Daniel, who hadn't experienced direct discrimination but had witnessed enough to be concerned, leaned forward. Walsh and Harrison have been trying to split you all up. Scheduling conflicts, different assignments. They don't want you comparing notes. Classic divide and conquer, Sarah agreed. Which is why we need to organize. Compare evaluations, document disparities, collect evidence. I can help with the technology side, Taylor offered. I worked in IT before the academy. The group dispersed strategically, leaving at different times to avoid drawing attention. Sarah was last to leave, nearly bumping into Walsh as she exited the library. Quite the study group, Mercer, he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. Recruiting a little fan club? Just preparing for exams, sir, Sarah replied evenly. Interesting collection of recruits. All the special cases. Sarah met his gaze directly. Every recruit deserves the same opportunity to succeed, sir. Some people aren't cut out for this work. Better they learn that here than on the streets where lives are at stake. Walsh stepped closer. This isn't personal, Mercer. It's about maintaining standards. If the standards are applied equally, sir, I have no objection to them being high. Walsh's expression hardened. You think you know something about how this academy works. You don't. You're poking a hornet's nest. I'd reconsider if I were you. After he left, Sarah made her way to the administrative office on the pretext of checking her evaluation file. The receptionist, Mrs. Winters, had worked at the academy for decades. Those Wall of Fame photos, Sarah asked casually. I noticed there are years missing, 1993 to 1995. Mrs. Winters lowered her voice. The Diversity Initiative, Commissioner Davis's pet project when he was just an instructor, recruited promising candidates from underrepresented communities. What happened to them? Most didn't make it through. Washout rate was nearly 70%. Mrs. Winters glanced around before adding, there was an instructor back then, Mitchell. Walsh's mentor. Had similar methods. And the ones who graduated? The photos that were supposedly damaged. Mrs. Winters smiled sadly. Look up Erica Chen, class of '94. Made detective in record time. Filed a discrimination suit in '98. Case was settled privately, record sealed. She left the force afterward. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This wasn't just institutional bias. It was a deliberate system of exclusion that had operated for decades, targeting those deemed unsuitable regardless of their actual abilities. The partially burned internal affairs report lay on Sarah's desk, its charred edges and water damage telling a story beyond the redacted text. Lieutenant Rivera had found it buried in archived files, marked for destruction, a remnant of an investigation abruptly terminated 7 years earlier. Jesus, Maya whispered, reading over Sarah's shoulder. They actually investigated Walsh before. And Commissioner Davis shut it down. Sarah pointed to the final page where Davis's signature authorized the case closure. Insufficient evidence. Cited as the official reason. The report detailed allegations disturbingly similar to what Sarah had documented. Targeted equipment failures, biased evaluations, disproportionate washout rates for female and minority recruits. The investigation had advanced to preliminary findings before being suddenly terminated. This changes everything, Sarah said. It proves knowledge at the highest level. Not just Walsh and Harrison. Davis himself has been complicit. A sharp knock interrupted them. Maya quickly gathered the papers as Sarah opened the door. Daniel stood there, expression grim. We have a problem. Jenkins just got called to the commissioner's office. Amir and Taylor too. What happened? Someone leaked that we've been gathering evidence. Walsh is calling it conspiracy to undermine academy leadership. Sarah's stomach tightened. Who talked? That's the thing, it wasn't any of us. My guess? They've been monitoring communications. Academy IT has access to everything on campus networks. The realization hit hard. Their careful coordination, their documentation efforts, all potentially compromised. There's more, Daniel added, lowering his voice. Rivera's been placed on administrative leave. No explanation given. The support structure Sarah had carefully built was crumbling. Without Rivera's inside access and Jenkins's tacit approval, their evidence gathering would be severely hampered. Her phone vibrated. A text from Gaines. Network compromised. Go dark. Don't use academy systems for anything sensitive. Sarah deleted the message immediately. We need to warn the others. Too late for Taylor, Daniel said. Just got word she's withdrawing from the academy. Pressure was too much. One by one, the allies Sarah had gathered were being isolated, intimidated, or removed. The system was protecting itself with ruthless efficiency. That evening, Maya returned to their room looking shaken. Harrison cornered me after class, she admitted. Told me my evaluation scores would reflect my poor choice of associations unless I provided him with details about your activities. What did you tell him? Nothing he wanted to hear. Maya sat heavily on her bed. But Sarah, I'm scared. My mom depends on my income. If I wash out, I understand if you need to distance yourself, Sarah said, meaning it. That's not. Maya's voice cracked. I want to help, but they're watching everything now. Harrison hinted they have access to our personal communications. Sarah nodded, the scope of the surveillance becoming clear. She reached for her journal only to freeze. It wasn't where she'd left it. A quick search confirmed her fear. The journal was gone, along with the USB drives she'd hidden beneath her mattress. Someone had searched their room while they were in class. They're making their move, she told Maya. Removing evidence, isolating witnesses. The next morning brought confirmation. Commissioner Davis had announced a special review panel to address concerns about academy training methods. A panel he would personally chair, comprised of instructors loyal to him. In the hallway, Sarah passed Amir, who deliberately avoided eye contact. Taylor was already gone. Even Daniel seemed hesitant when she approached him after tactics class. I need to focus on graduation, he said awkwardly. My family's counting on me. I'm sorry, Sarah. By afternoon, Sarah sat alone in the library, the isolation almost complete. Her carefully gathered evidence was gone, her allies scattered or silenced. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check your family. Heart-pounding, Sarah called her grandfather. Sadie, his voice sounded tired, had some visitors yesterday. 2 men asking questions about you. Said they were from the academy doing background checks. Are you okay? She asked, fear rising in her throat. I'm fine. Told them I taught you to shoot straight and speak truth. They didn't like that much. He paused. They're trying to scare you, Sadie. Means you've got them worried. As Sarah hung up, she found another message waiting. A photo of her Kentucky home, clearly taken recently, with the words, "Is this worth it?" Returning to her room that evening, Sarah found the door ajar. Inside, everything had been upended. Drawers emptied, mattress slashed, personal belongings scattered. On her desk lay a single sheet of paper. Withdraw. The message was clear. This wasn't just about her academy standing anymore. They were escalating to threats against her family. For the first time since arriving at Westpoint, Sarah questioned whether she could win this fight. The encrypted email account opened on Sarah's personal laptop, displaying dozens of messages she'd never seen before. Officer Gaines had sent her the login credentials via text, a single-use burner number that disconnected immediately after. Welcome to the Shadow Network, read the account's signature line. The emails dated back years, each from a different academy graduate or former recruit who had experienced systematic discrimination. Sarah scrolled through message after message, heart-pounding. This wasn't just a few disgruntled recruits. It was an organized underground network of witnesses spanning multiple academy classes. They called themselves the Watchdogs, communicating through this encrypted channel to document abuses while protecting their identities. A message from username Founder94 caught her attention. Recruit Mercer, your actions with the Junker pistol weren't just brave. They were strategic. You've done what many of us tried and failed to do. Create irrefutable, documented evidence of deliberate sabotage. The Academy's response confirms what we've long suspected. This discrimination isn't just a few bad instructors, it's institutional policy. Sarah realized with a jolt that Founder94 must be Erica Chun, the detective who had filed the discrimination suit in 1998. Another message explained why her room had been searched. They're panicking because you documented everything in official channels. The range log entry forced them to acknowledge the issue formally. Previous complaints were kept verbal or filed through internal systems they control. You created a paper trail they can't easily erase. The most recent email contained a bombshell. Your recruitment wasn't random. Davis personally approved your application because of your brother's case. They know your motivation for joining law enforcement. They expected you to be vocal about reform, planned to make an example of you. The Junker pistol was supposed to be your breaking point, public failure justifying dismissal. Your success threw their entire playbook into chaos. Sarah sat back, processing this revelation. She hadn't just stumbled into their discrimination system. She'd been deliberately selected as its next target. A new message appeared from username Rangemaster. Security Office, Locker Number 17. Combination 36-24-18. Come alone? 200 hours. Jenkins. He was taking an enormous risk contacting her this way. That night, Sarah slipped out of the barracks after lights out. The security office was deserted at 2 a.m. Locker number 17 opened with the provided combination, revealing a thick folder and a digital recorder. "I've been documenting everything for 3 years." Jenkins's voice came from behind her. "Every equipment malfunction, every biased evaluation, every recruit forced out." Sarah turned to face him. "Why didn't you come forward before?" "Tried once. Nearly lost my job." Jenkins nodded at the folder. "That's every weapon maintenance record for the past 5 years, showing which recruits were assigned defective equipment and when. Patterns clear as day. Why help me now? You're risking everything. Because you've already done what no one else could. Create a public record that can't be buried." Jenkins's weathered face showed determination. The Junker pistol incident forced Davis to acknowledge the issue officially. Now he's scrambling to control the narrative with his special review panel, which he'll manipulate to clear the academy, Sarah said. "Probably, unless someone presents evidence so compelling and public that it can't be ignored." Jenkins handed her a small flash drive. Security footage. Every instance of Walsh and Harrison deliberately assigning faulty equipment to specific recruits. "I've been making copies for years." Sarah stared at the drive. "This could end your career. Maybe it's time. 22 years watching good recruits broken by a corrupt system. Sometimes I wonder if my silence made me complicit." As Sarah returned to her barracks, a new email awaited on the encrypted account. "Commissioner Davis isn't just covering for Walsh and Harrison. He created the system. His diversity initiative in the 90s was genuine, but when it succeeded, it threatened the old guard's control. The pushback was severe. Davis had a choice. Fight the system or join it. He chose advancement over principles, became the very thing he once opposed." Another piece clicked into place. Davis wasn't just an administrator protecting subordinates. He was the architect of the very system Sarah was fighting. A final message appeared before she logged off. "Your brother's case wasn't random either. The arresting officers were Walsh's protégés, academy graduates trained in his methods. The connection goes deeper than you know. This isn't just about academy reform. It's about how that broken training creates broken officers who perpetuate injustice on the streets." Sarah's personal quest for justice and institutional reform were more intertwined than she'd realized. The system that had wrongfully imprisoned her brother was the same one she was fighting at the academy, a pipeline of bias that extended from training to real-world policing. This wasn't just her fight anymore. It was about breaking a cycle that affected countless lives beyond the academy walls. The media dossier sat on Sarah's coffee shop table, a nondescript manila envelope containing everything she'd managed to salvage and organize from the Shadow Network's files. Carefully curated evidence, maintenance records, statistical analyses of evaluation disparities, testimonials from former recruits, and security footage, all arranged for maximum impact. "If you release this publicly, there's no going back," Elena Gaines warned, sliding into the booth across from her. They'd chosen a location miles from the academy, away from familiar eyes. "I know," Sarah replied. "That's why I need to be strategic. Going to the media directly could backfire. They'd spin it as a disgruntled recruit's allegations." "So what's the play?" Sarah outlined her approach. "The academy announced their special review panel for next week. Perfect timing. Instead of fighting it, I'll use it, present everything in an official forum, create a public record they can't easily bury." "Davis will control that panel," Gaines reminded her. "Maybe, but I've learned he responds to political pressure." Sarah tapped the dossier. "I'm having copies of this prepared for the Police Oversight Committee, the mayor's office, and my journalist contact, to be delivered automatically if anything happens to me or if the review is obviously rigged." Gaines nodded approvingly. "Insurance policy. Smart. I learned from the Shadow Network. This isn't just about me anymore." As they parted, Sarah noticed a dark sedan parked across the street, its occupant suspiciously attentive. The surveillance was becoming more obvious, a pressure tactic meant to unnerve her. Back at the academy, She found Lieutenant Rivera waiting near her barracks, now in civilian clothes. "They're scrambling," he said without preamble. "My administrative leave was supposed to silence me, but it's freed me to speak more openly. I've been interviewed by Internal Affairs, the real one, not Davis's puppets." Sarah's pulse quickened. "What does that mean?" "It means your documentation created waves beyond the academy. The department can't ignore formal allegations of discrimination, especially with statistical evidence backing it up." "Is that why I'm being followed?" Sarah asked. Rivera nodded grimly. "They're watching your every move. Be careful about your communications, your movements. Trust no academy systems." As he walked away, Sarah felt eyes on her from multiple directions. The pressure was intensifying as her final qualification tests approached, the last opportunity for Walsh and Harrison to force her out before the review panel. That evening, a text arrived from an unknown number. "Grandfather asking about you. Seemed concerned about your safety. Nice man, very hospitable." The implied threat was clear. Another attempt to pressure her into backing down. Sarah called her grandfather immediately. "I'm fine, Sadie," he assured her, though his voice sounded strained. "Had more visitors today. Didn't bother with the background check pretense this time. Just wanted me to know they could find me anytime." "I'm so sorry, Grandpa. This is getting out of hand." "Don't you dare apologize," he replied firmly. "You're doing exactly what I raised you to do, standing your ground when it matters. I'm coming to you." "What? No, it's not safe. I'm 74, not dead." He cut her off. "Caught the early bus this morning. I'll be there tomorrow. You're not facing this alone." The next day brought the final firearms qualification, a comprehensive course that would determine whether recruits advanced to graduation. Sarah arrived early, methodically inspecting her assigned weapon, unsurprised to find the firing pin had been subtly filed down. "Problem with your firearm, Recruit Mercer?" Walsh asked, materializing beside her. "Yes, sir. Firing pin shows signs of tampering." She held up the pin, showing the visible marks. "I'll need a replacement according to range safety protocols." Walsh's face darkened as other recruits watched the exchange. "That's a serious accusation." "Not an accusation, sir. An observation of equipment condition, documented according to procedure." Sarah kept her voice neutral, aware of the gathering audience. "Range Master Jenkins can verify the tampering if necessary." Walsh reluctantly authorized a replacement, his plan foiled by Sarah's careful inspection and public documentation. As the qualification proceeded, Sarah noticed Commissioner Davis observing from the range office, his expression calculating. When her turn came, she executed the course flawlessly, her score placing her second overall among the recruits. Later that afternoon, she was summoned to Davis's office. The commissioner sat behind his desk, projecting affable authority. "Impressive performance today, Recruit Mercer. You've demonstrated remarkable adaptability." "Thank you, sir." Davis studied her. "I could use someone with your skills on my personal staff after graduation. Fast track to academy instruction, influence over training protocols, the very reforms you've been advocating." Sarah recognized the offer for what it was, a bribe disguised as opportunity. The chance to bypass patrol duty for a prestigious position in exchange for dropping her complaints. "I appreciate the consideration, sir," she replied carefully, "but I believe my skills would be best utilized in standard patrol assignments, experiencing the direct impact of academy training." Davis's smile tightened. "That's unfortunate. Such opportunities rarely present themselves to junior officers." "I understand, sir. I don't think you do." All pretense of congeniality vanished. "The review panel begins in 3 days. Consider carefully how you want your academy career to conclude." The threat hung in the air, but Sarah left with renewed determination. Davis's attempted bribe confirmed what the Shadow Network had revealed. They were genuinely afraid of what she might present at the review panel. The confrontation was coming, and Sarah was ready. The system had tried every tactic: intimidation, sabotage, surveillance, threats to her family, and now bribery. None had worked. In 3 days, she would present her evidence. All she needed to do was survive until then. Sarah's grandfather's Medal of Valor gleamed in her palm, its brass surface worn smooth from years of handling. He'd received it decades ago for pulling 3 children from a burning building while serving as a volunteer firefighter. Long before he'd taught his granddaughter to shoot straight and stand firm. "Carry it with you tomorrow," he said, pressing it into her hand. "Remember what it stands for." Thomas Mercer had arrived as promised, his weathered face a welcome sight after weeks of isolation and pressure. They sat in a small diner miles from the academy, where Sarah had arranged to meet him after her final day of pre-review preparations. "They changed the venue," Sarah told him, tucking the medal into her pocket. "Originally scheduled for the main lecture hall, now moved to the small conference room in the administrative wing. Limited seating, controlled access. Trying to minimize witnesses," her grandfather observed. "And they've restricted the scope. Only current training protocols are to be discussed, not historical patterns or individual personnel issues." Thomas snorted. "Can't examine the disease if you're not allowed to look at the symptoms." "Exactly." Sarah sipped her coffee. "But I've anticipated this. The evidence I've prepared focuses on systemic issues documented in official academy records. They can't restrict me from presenting facts already in their own files." The morning of the review panel dawned clear and cool. Sarah arrived early to find an unexpected crowd gathered outside the administrative building. Recruits from every squad, several instructors, even a few patrol officers in uniform. Daniel approached her, looking uncomfortable but determined. "We're here to witness," he said simply. "Word spread about the venue change. People want to know what happens." Sarah was touched by the show of support, especially from those who had distanced themselves earlier. Fear of association had given way to curiosity, or perhaps conscience. Captain Harrison appeared, visibly irritated by the gathering. "The review is a closed administrative proceeding. Only those with official business may enter." Murmurs of protest rose from the crowd. Sarah noticed Lieutenant Rivera moving through the group, speaking quietly to key individuals. Whatever he was saying caused people to stand their ground rather than disperse. Inside, Sarah found the conference room arranged to intimidate. A long table where the panel would sit facing a single chair positioned like a defendant's seat. Commissioner Davis presided, flanked by Walsh, Harrison, and 2 senior instructors known for their traditional views. "Due to unexpected interest, we've made arrangements to record these proceedings," Davis announced, nodding to a video camera in the corner. "For transparency." Sarah recognized the tactic, controlling the official record while limiting live witnesses. As she organized her materials, the door opened again. Range Master Jenkins entered, followed by Officer Gaines and 3 other former recruits from the Shadow Network. They took seats along the wall, their presence a silent statement of solidarity. Most surprising was the arrival of a man in an expensive suit, who handed Davis a business card before sitting directly behind Sarah. "James Mitchell, Department Legal Counsel," Davis announced, looking displeased. "Though I wasn't aware legal representation was necessary for an informal review." "I'm here as an observer," Mitchell replied. The chief's office received multiple inquiries about today's proceedings. Sarah suppressed a smile. The insurance copies of her dossier had created exactly the external pressure she'd hoped for. The proceedings began with Davis outlining the purpose, addressing concerns about training methodologies while maintaining the Academy's high standards, and establishing rules clearly designed to limit Sarah's presentation. Recruit Mercer will have 15 minutes to present specific concerns about current training protocols. The panel will then deliberate on potential adjustments to these protocols. "Sir," Sarah interjected, 15 minutes is insufficient to address systemic issues affecting multiple aspects of training. These proceedings are not a platform for broad accusations, Recruit Mercer. They are a focused examination of specific protocols that may require refinement. With respect, sir, the issues I've documented are interconnected. Artificial constraints will prevent a comprehensive understanding of. The time limit stands, Davis interrupted. This is not a trial, Recruit Mercer. It's an administrative review with limited scope. From the doorway came a new voice. Perhaps the scope should be reconsidered. All heads turned to see a tall, distinguished man in the uniform of the Chief of Police. Silence fell over the room as Chief Williams entered, his unexpected arrival clearly throwing Davis off balance. "Chief," Davis recovered quickly, rising to shake his hand. "We weren't aware you'd be joining us." Clearly, Williams surveyed the room, noting the arrangement, the limited seating, the single chair facing the panel. "I received some concerning information about potential systemic issues at the academy. Thought I should see for myself how they're being addressed." Sarah felt the weight of her grandfather's medal in her pocket as the dynamics of the room shifted dramatically. The carefully controlled proceeding Davis had planned was unraveling before it had properly begun. The chief took a seat directly opposite Davis. "Please continue. I'm particularly interested in hearing Recruit Mercer's complete presentation, without arbitrary time constraints." The Academy training video played on the conference room screen, its dated production quality only emphasizing the gap between policy and practice. Sarah had found it in the archives, a 2018 instructional film emphasizing equal access to equipment and fair evaluation standards for all recruits regardless of gender, race, or background. "This official Academy video," Sarah explained, standing beside the screen rather than sitting in the isolated chair, explicitly states that all recruits will be evaluated using identical criteria and provided with properly maintained equipment. Yet, the documented evidence shows a pattern of selective equipment sabotage targeting specific demographics. She moved methodically through her presentation, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. Commissioner Davis sat rigidly, while Walsh and Harrison exchanged increasingly uncomfortable glances as Sarah presented exhibit after exhibit of meticulously documented evidence. "The Junker pistol incident wasn't isolated," she continued, displaying the range log entry she'd made alongside Jenkins's maintenance records. "This weapon was reported as defective 18 months ago, with specific recommendations for repair or replacement. Instead, it was deliberately kept in circulation and selectively assigned to recruits deemed unsuitable by certain instructors." Chief Williams leaned forward, his expression grave. "And you have documentation of this selective assignment?" "Yes, sir." Sarah displayed the security footage from Jenkins's flash drive, showing Walsh deliberately selecting the Junker pistol before Sarah's qualification test. Furthermore, Range Master Jenkins has maintained records of weapon assignments for the past 3 years, showing a statistically significant pattern of defective equipment being assigned to female recruits and minorities. Jenkins nodded confirmation when eyes turned to him. Walsh's face reddened. "This is absurd. Equipment is assigned randomly based on availability." "With respect, Sergeant," Sarah interrupted, displaying a statistical analysis, "the probability of this distribution occurring randomly is less than 0.02%. This isn't chance. It's deliberate policy." She moved to evaluation data next, showing clear disparities in how subjective criteria like leadership potential and adaptability were scored across demographic lines. Recruits with identical performance metrics in objective categories received dramatically different scores in subjective categories depending on gender and race, she explained. "The impact is cumulative, resulting in disproportionate washout rates for qualified candidates who don't fit the traditional profile." Davis attempted to regain control. "These are serious allegations, Recruit Mercer, but they appear to focus on individual grievances rather than systemic issues." "With respect, Commissioner," Sarah countered, "these aren't allegations. They're documented facts from the Academy's own records, and they demonstrate a systemic pattern spanning years, affecting dozens of recruits." She proceeded to testimonials from former recruits, presenting them as anonymized data to protect their identities while establishing the persistent nature of the discrimination. Walsh finally erupted, unable to contain himself. "This is nothing but a vendetta from a recruit who doesn't understand the rigors of proper training. Law enforcement isn't about coddling people's feelings. It's about ensuring only the strongest survive because lives depend on it. Is deliberately sabotaging equipment part of that rigor, Sergeant?" Chief Williams asked quietly. Sometimes recruits need to be tested beyond standard parameters. Walsh insisted, digging himself deeper. The streets don't care about fair conditions. If they can't handle a little adversity in training. So you admit to deliberately assigning substandard equipment to certain recruits? The chief pressed. Walsh realized his mistake too late. That's not what I meant. What did you mean, Sergeant? Sarah asked, seizing the opening. Because the evidence shows a coordinated effort to create artificial barriers for specific recruits. Not to test resilience, but to force them out regardless of their actual qualifications. Harrison attempted damage control. These are training methodologies developed over decades of experience. They may appear harsh to outsiders, but they serve a purpose in identifying those truly suited to law enforcement. And who determines who is truly suited? Sarah challenged. The data shows that these methodologies disproportionately eliminate candidates who don't conform to a very specific profile, regardless of their actual performance. Davis intervened, his tone conciliatory but firm. I think we need to distinguish between rigorous training and the concerning patterns Recruit Mercer has identified. Perhaps some of our methods require modernization. Sarah recognized the pivot. Davis was attempting to acknowledge enough to appear reasonable while minimizing personal culpability. She wasn't about to let him off so easily. Commissioner, I have one more exhibit. She displayed a partially redacted document. This is an internal affairs investigation from 7 years ago, examining identical issues at the Academy. That investigation was terminated by your direct order, citing insufficient evidence despite preliminary findings that supported the allegations. The room fell silent. Davis's expression hardened as he realized the extent of Sarah's evidence. You've made your point, Recruit Mercer, he said coldly. The panel will consider your concerns. Actually, Chief Williams interjected. I believe we need to hear from others present. Range Master Jenkins, would you care to confirm or refute Recruit Mercer's documentation regarding equipment assignments? Jenkins stood, his posture military straight. I can confirm that the assignment patterns she's identified are accurate. I've attempted to address these issues through proper channels for years without success. The carefully constructed narrative was crumbling, and Walsh knew it. His face contorted with anger as he pointed at Sarah. You think you're changing the system? You're just destroying what keeps people safe. Some people aren't cut out for this work, and no amount of diversity initiatives or sensitivity training will change that. His outburst hung in the air, damning in its naked prejudice. Even Harrison winced at the implications. Sarah remained composed, allowing Walsh's words to speak for themselves. This isn't about lowering standards, she said quietly. It's about applying them equally to everyone. The modified Junker pistol sat on the conference table, its worn frame and chipped components now tagged with evidence markers. Range Master Jenkins had brought it in himself, placing it carefully before the panel as Exhibit A in what had evolved from a review into something closer to a tribunal. This weapon, Jenkins testified, has been deliberately maintained in a compromised state despite multiple repair requests. I've documented each instance where it was specifically assigned to female recruits, or minorities, particularly those who questioned existing protocols. Chief Williams examined the pistol, noting the bent sight that had been crudely straightened and the chipped extractor that would cause persistent jamming. And Recruit Mercer was assigned this weapon for her qualification test? He confirmed. Yes, sir. Despite her known awareness of its defects, in fact, because of it, the assignment was meant to humiliate her publicly when she failed. Walsh shifted uncomfortably as Jenkins continued, providing detailed maintenance records showing the weapon had been flagged as unsafe multiple times, but kept in rotation by direct order from Walsh and Harrison. I've been documenting these incidents for 3 years, Jenkins explained, displaying his meticulously organized records. Initially through proper channels, later privately when it became clear my concerns were being buried. Lieutenant Rivera testified next, now reinstated from administrative leave by the chief's direct order. He presented statistical evidence of evaluation disparities. Identical performances receiving dramatically different scores based on the recruit's background. These aren't subjective interpretations, Rivera emphasized. The data shows consistent patterns across multiple classes. Objective scores like marksmanship and tactical knowledge remain comparable across demographics, but subjective categories like command presence and stress resilience show statistically significant bias. The pattern was undeniable, especially when Rivera introduced evidence of altered records. Evaluation scores changed after submission to ensure certain recruits remained below advancement thresholds. I discovered these discrepancies accidentally, Rivera explained. Original evaluations I'd submitted were later modified in the system. When I questioned it, I was told it was administrative adjustment for consistency. Davis attempted to deflect responsibility onto clerical errors, but Officer Gaines countered with testimony about her own academy experience, identical to what current recruits described. This isn't new, she stated firmly. It's been happening for years, systematically driving out qualified candidates who don't fit a very specific mold. Throughout the testimonies, Sarah remained composed, letting the evidence speak for itself. Her preparation had been thorough, her strategy sound, creating a forum where the truth could emerge from multiple sources, not just her own allegations. Walsh and Harrison grew increasingly defensive, attempting to justify their methods as necessary rigor while denying any discriminatory intent. But with each denial came contradictions that further undermined their credibility. If the Junker pistol was just a random assignment, the chief asked pointedly, why does the security footage show you specifically selecting it for recruit Mercer after discussing her with Captain Harrison? Walsh had no coherent answer. Commissioner Davis, recognizing the inevitable, shifted to damage control. Clearly there have been concerning lapses in oversight. I assure you, Chief, I had no knowledge of these specific incidents. That's not entirely accurate, Commissioner, Sarah interjected quietly, producing her final piece of evidence. Emails between Davis and Walsh discussing problem recruits and ways to challenge their suitability. These communications, Sarah explained, show explicit direction to apply different standards to recruits deemed unsuitable, with specific reference to several female and minority candidates who later withdrew. Davis paled visibly. Where did you get those? They were provided by the Shadow Network, graduates and former recruits who've been documenting these practices for years. The room fell silent as the full scope of the system was finally exposed. Not isolated incidents or a few biased instructors, but an institutional policy of discrimination implemented with the knowledge and approval of Academy leadership. Chief Williams had seen enough. This review is concluded. Based on the evidence presented, I'm ordering an immediate, independent investigation of Academy practices by the Oversight Committee. Sergeant Walsh and Captain Harrison are placed on administrative leave pending the investigation's outcome. He turned to Davis. Commissioner, I expect your full cooperation with the investigation. We'll discuss your continued role at the Academy once the findings are complete. Davis nodded stiffly, his carefully constructed authority crumbling before him. As the formal proceedings ended, Sarah found herself surrounded by recruits and officers offering quiet thanks or respectful nods. The wall of isolation had broken. Her stand against the system had resonated beyond her individual case. Her grandfather waited outside, pride evident in his weathered face. You did it, Sadie. You hit every target. Sarah touched the medal of valor in her pocket. Not just me, Grandpa. Everyone who spoke up, everyone who documented what happened to them. The Shadow Network, Jenkins, Rivera, it took all of us. That's how change happens, he replied. One person stands up first, gives others the courage to follow. Looking back at the Academy building, Sarah felt mixed emotions, satisfaction at exposing the truth, but awareness of the long road ahead to truly transform the institution. This victory was significant but incomplete. Real change would require sustained effort and vigilance. What happens now? Her grandfather asked. Now the real work begins, Sarah answered. Identifying every aspect of the system that needs reform, ensuring the investigation is thorough, holding people accountable, and then rebuilding something better. The new Academy protocol's binder sat open on Sarah's desk, its pages filled with reformed training guidelines that incorporated her direct input. 1 month had passed since the review panel, a month of intense scrutiny, formal investigations, and the beginning of substantial changes at Westpoint Police Academy. Sarah traced her finger over the section on equipment maintenance and assignment, now requiring documented inspection before each use, random distribution verified by 2 officers, and immediate reporting of any defects. The revisions addressed not just the symptoms but the underlying systems that had allowed discrimination to flourish. "Hard to believe we actually got it implemented," Lieutenant Rivera said, now promoted to head of training after Walsh and Harrison's removal. "The Oversight Committee wanted to delay until next year." "Chief Williams was surprisingly adamant," Sarah replied. "Said there was no justification for postponing necessary reforms." The chief had emerged as an unexpected ally, his initial interest in the review panel evolving into personal involvement in the reform process. He'd appointed Sarah to the advisory committee despite her recruit status, an unprecedented move that signaled the seriousness of the changes underway. "The new class arrives next week," Rivera noted. "Most diverse in academy history, 47% women and minorities." The numbers represented more than statistics. They reflected qualified candidates who might previously have been driven out by the system's artificial barriers. Sarah felt a quiet satisfaction knowing they would experience a fundamentally different academy than she had. Commissioner Davis had resigned 3 weeks after the review, citing personal reasons, but clearly pushed out by mounting evidence of his complicity. Walsh and Harrison remained on administrative leave while the investigation proceeded, their careers effectively over regardless of the final outcome. A knock interrupted their discussion. Range Master Jenkins entered, looking more relaxed than Sarah had ever seen him. "They're ready for the ceremony," he announced. Sarah followed him to the main hall, where a small gathering had assembled, recruits from her class, academy staff, several officers from the Shadow Network, and a few department officials. Her grandfather sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Chief Williams stepped to the podium. "Today we recognize individuals whose courage and integrity exposed serious flaws in our training systems, flaws that had undermined our department's commitment to excellence and equal opportunity for far too long." One by one, he called forward those who had risked their careers to document and challenge the discriminatory practices: Jenkins, Rivera, Gaines, and others from the Shadow Network. Each received formal commendations for exceptional service to the department and community. Finally, the chief continued, "We recognize recruit Sarah Mercer, whose refusal to accept discrimination disguised as tradition forced our institution to confront uncomfortable truths and begin necessary changes." As Sarah accepted her commendation, she saw mixed reactions in the audience. Some enthusiastically supportive, others clearly uncomfortable with the public acknowledgement of institutional failure. Real change never came without resistance, she knew. The formal recognition was important not for her personal validation, but as an official statement that the department was committed to reform. "The work we've begun here extends beyond the academy," the chief concluded. "These reforms will influence how our officers approach their duties throughout their careers, with fairness, integrity, and respect for every member of our community." After the ceremony, Sarah's grandfather embraced her, his eyes suspiciously moist. "Your grandmother would have been so proud," he said softly. "Standing up when it matters, no matter the cost. That's what she always did." Sarah had never known her grandmother, who had died before her birth, but had grown up hearing stories of her activism for rural healthcare access in Kentucky. The comparison touched her deeply. "I couldn't have done it without your teaching," she told him. "Knowing the difference between a broken tool and one that just needs proper handling." He chuckled. "The pistol was just metal and springs. It's the hand that holds it that matters, and the heart behind that hand." He glanced around at the academy that was slowly transforming. "You've started something important here, Sadie. Something that'll make a difference long after that Junker pistol is forgotten." As her grandfather departed for his bus home, Sarah returned to the advisory committee meeting. There was still much work to be done. Reforms to implement, resistance to overcome, progress to monitor. But for the first time since arriving at Westpoint, She felt genuine hope that the system could change. The Junker pistol that was meant to break her had instead become the catalyst for breaking a cycle of discrimination that had persisted for decades. As her grandfather would say, sometimes the tools meant to defeat you become the very ones that help you build something better. Sarah's badge caught the morning sunlight as she stood at attention with her fellow graduates. The polished metal represented not just her successful completion of the academy, but her triumph over a system designed to exclude her. The graduation ceremony felt surreal after everything that had transpired. A moment she'd fought for not just for herself, but for every recruit who'd been unfairly pushed out before her. Commissioner Reynolds, Davis's replacement, addressed the graduating class with a refreshing directness. You enter law enforcement during a time of significant transformation. The changes implemented during your training will follow you into your careers, not as burdens, but as foundations for a more effective and equitable approach to policing. Sarah's gaze traveled across the audience, her grandfather beaming in the front row, Maya beside him, their friendship stronger for having weathered the storm together, Jenkins and Rivera standing with the academy staff, and scattered throughout, members of the Shadow Network who'd come to witness this milestone. As names were called, Sarah noted the diversity of her graduating class, still not fully representative of the community they would serve, but markedly improved from historical patterns. Daniel crossed the stage before her, giving her a subtle nod of respect. Their relationship had been complicated by his initial retreat when pressure mounted, but his eventual return to support her reforms had rebuilt a measure of trust. Sarah Mercer, Commissioner Reynolds announced. She stepped forward to receive her badge and credentials, the weight of the moment not lost on her. What had begun as a personal stand against discrimination had evolved into institutional transformation that would affect generations of future officers. After the ceremony, Chief Williams approached her. Officer Mercer, congratulations. Thank you, sir. Your first assignment has been finalized. Southwest Precinct, Patrol Division under Lieutenant Gaines. Sarah's surprise must have shown on her face. Elena Gaines had been promoted to lieutenant just weeks earlier, part of the department's efforts to advance qualified officers whose careers had been stalled by the old system. I requested you specifically, Gaines said, joining them. My precinct serves a diverse community that needs officers who understand the importance of equal treatment under the law. Your perspective will be valuable. The assignment was meaningful beyond the professional opportunity. Southwest Precinct included the neighborhood where Sarah's brother had been wrongfully arrested, a chance to begin healing that wound through improved policing practices. Commissioner Reynolds joined their conversation. Before you dive into patrol duties, Officer Mercer, I'd like your continued input on academy reforms. Perhaps one day per week dedicated to training consultation. I'd be honored, sir, Sarah replied, recognizing. This hybrid role would allow her to influence both current operations and future training. As the crowd dispersed, Sarah found herself alone with Commissioner Reynolds, a career administrator with a reputation for political astuteness. I want to be frank with you, Mercer, he said quietly. When I took this position, some advised me to distance the academy from the controversies you exposed, to implement minimal reforms and move on. Chief Williams convinced me otherwise. I appreciate your candor, sir. What you did required exceptional courage. But the real test comes now, translating identified problems into sustainable solutions. Reynolds studied her thoughtfully. There are those in the department who still resent these changes, who see them as unnecessary concessions rather than essential improvements. I'm aware of the resistance, sir. Good, because your work isn't finished. It's just beginning. The academy was just one front in a larger cultural battle within law enforcement. The real challenge is changing how these principles are applied on the streets. Sarah understood. Institutional reform wasn't accomplished through a single victory or policy change. It required persistent effort across years, continually reinforcing new standards and expectations. Maya approached as Reynolds departed. Officer Mercer, she said with a teasing salute. Ready to change the world? One patrol shift at a time, Sarah replied, smiling. They walked together toward the reception, their conversation turning to their upcoming assignments. Maya to the northern precinct, Sarah to Southwest. Different locations but shared purpose. Applying the lessons they'd learned about integrity and equal treatment to their daily interactions with the community. I still can't believe that Junker pistol moment led to all this, Maya mused. It wasn't just the pistol, Sarah said. It was everything that came after. People finding the courage to speak up, to document what they experienced, to demand better. As they joined the celebration, Sarah felt the weight of her new badge. Not as a burden, but as a responsibility. The academy had been transformed, but the greater challenge lay ahead. Ensuring those changes translated into real-world impact in the communities they served. The system that had tried to break her had instead been broken open, creating space for something better to grow in its place. The framed newspaper article hung in the community meeting room of Southwest Precinct, its headline still crisp despite being 6 months old. Police Academy reforms strengthen community trust. Sarah paused before it on her way to her weekly community outreach session, reflecting on the journey since graduation. The article detailed the comprehensive changes implemented at Westpoint, revised training protocols, transparent evaluation systems, and a new emphasis on community-centered policing. It quoted Chief Williams, "These reforms aren't just about who we recruit, but how we train them to serve and protect all members of our community with equal dedication." "Still proud of that one," Lieutenant Gaines said, joining Sarah. First time the department publicly acknowledged the problems instead of just quietly fixing them. Sarah nodded. The public recognition had been important, not just for accountability but for rebuilding community trust that had eroded through years of unequal treatment. "Your brother's coming to the community forum today," Gaines mentioned casually. Sarah felt a flutter of surprise. Michael had been released from prison 3 months earlier, his conviction overturned after evidence emerged of procedural violations in his arrest and prosecution. Violations connected to officers trained under the old academy system. Their relationship remained complicated. Michael's experience had inspired Sarah to join law enforcement, but he remained skeptical of the institution that had taken 3 years of his life. "He's been working with the Citizen Oversight Committee," Gaines continued. "His perspective has been valuable. Someone who experienced the worst of the system helping to reshape it." The community forum brought together residents, officers, and local leaders to discuss neighborhood concerns and collaborative solutions. These meetings had been instituted in all precincts following the academy reforms, part of a broader effort to transform the department's relationship with the communities it served. Sarah spotted Michael as soon as she entered. Her older brother still carried himself with the cautious alertness developed during his incarceration. He acknowledged her with a reserved nod. After the formal discussion, he approached her. "Officer Mercer," he said, the formality not entirely ironic. "Mr. Mercer," she replied with a small smile. "Your lieutenant says you've been instrumental in implementing the new community engagement protocols." "Just applying what I learned at the academy, the reformed academy." Michael studied her. "It's still strange seeing you in that uniform." "I know, but..." He hesitated. "I've been hearing good things from people in the neighborhood who normally wouldn't have a kind word for anyone with a badge." Coming from Michael, this qualified approval meant more than any official commendation. "The reforms you started," he continued, "they've established a formal whistleblower protection program for officers reporting misconduct. Would have made a difference in my case." "It's not perfect," Sarah admitted. "There's still resistance, still old habits to overcome. Nothing worth doing happens overnight." Michael's expression softened slightly. "Mom told me your work helped overturn 3 other wrongful convictions similar to mine." Sarah hadn't known he was aware of that project. Her careful review of cases handled by officers trained under Walsh's system, identifying patterns of procedural violations that mirrored what happened to Michael. "Just trying to address the downstream effects," she said. "The academy problems didn't just affect who became officers. They shaped how those officers performed their duties." Michael nodded. "That's why I joined the Oversight Committee. Figure if you're working from the inside, I can push from the outside. Different approaches, same goal." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of community members wanting to speak with both of them. Michael, now recognized as an advocate for criminal justice reform, Sarah as an officer committed to new approaches to policing. Later, Walking to her patrol car, Sarah felt a sense of cautious optimism. The reforms were taking root, not just in policies and procedures, but in relationships being slowly rebuilt with communities that had experienced generations of unequal treatment. Her phone buzzed with a text from her grandfather. Saw the department newsletter. They're expanding your academy reforms to 3 other cities. Proud of you, Sadie. The impact was spreading beyond Westpoint, beyond their department. What had begun with a single act of resistance, refusing to fail with a deliberately sabotaged weapon, had catalyzed changes rippling outward in widening circles. Sarah knew the work was far from complete. Institutional transformation was measured in years, not months, and required constant vigilance against backsliding into comfortable old patterns. But for the first time since her brother's arrest, she felt genuine hope that meaningful change was possible, not just in isolated reforms, but in the fundamental relationship between those who enforced the law and those they served. The next generation's Junker pistol rested in Sarah's hands, its components laid out on the training room table. But unlike its predecessor, this weapon wasn't meant to sabotage recruits. It had been deliberately modified as a training tool, with each defect clearly labeled and documented. This is what we call our troubleshooting model, Sarah explained to the class of new instructors gathered before her. Every recruit learns to identify and address common malfunctions, regardless of their background or prior experience. 1 year after graduation, Sarah had been appointed to a part-time position at the Reformed Academy, developing training protocols that emphasized problem-solving over rote memorization. The infamous Junker pistol, once a tool of discrimination, had been transformed into a lesson in adaptation and resilience. The point isn't to create artificial barriers, she continued, but to ensure every officer can handle equipment issues that might arise in the field, where lives depend on quick, competent responses. Among her students were several former members of the Shadow Network, now moving into leadership positions throughout the department. Their presence represented the ongoing transformation, those once marginalized for questioning the system now helping to reshape it. After class, Lieutenant Rivera, now Academy Director Rivera following Commissioner Reynolds' retirement, joined her in the training room. The Oversight Committee approved your complete curriculum revision, he announced. Full implementation next quarter. Sarah smiled, satisfaction warming her chest. The new curriculum incorporated everything they'd learned about equitable training methods, emphasizing skills and judgment over conformity to tradition. Chief Williams mentioned you're being considered for the permanent training director position, Rivera added. I'm not sure I'm ready to leave patrol work entirely, Sarah admitted. Her dual role, officer in the field and academy consultant, had given her valuable perspective on how training translated to real-world policing. Think about it, Rivera suggested. The changes you've implemented need someone committed to maintaining them long-term. Institutional memory matters. People forget why reforms were necessary in the first place. Sarah understood his concern. Already, some veteran officers dismissed the academy transformation as political correctness, rather than necessary correction of systematic discrimination. Without vigilant leadership, old patterns could gradually reemerge. Later that afternoon, Sarah observed a qualification session on the range. Range Master Jenkins, still in his position but now nearing retirement, stood beside her, watching recruits of diverse backgrounds demonstrate their skills. Remember that day with the Junker? He asked quietly. Hard to forget, Sarah replied. Knew something was different about you when you adjusted that sight with a dime instead of complaining. Jenkins shook his head, smiling slightly. Never seen Walsh so shocked as when you hit every target. Sarah watched a female recruit expertly handle a malfunction in her weapon, applying the techniques now taught to everyone rather than left to prior experience. It was never about proving I could overcome a rigged test. It was about exposing the rigging itself. Well, you did both, Jenkins said. Changed everything. As the qualification session ended, Sarah addressed the recruits, noticing their attentiveness. Not the fearful focus she'd seen in her own class, but engaged concentration. The skills you're learning here extend beyond marksmanship, she told them. They're about approaching every challenge methodically, about maintaining composure under pressure, about finding solutions rather than assigning blame. She paused, looking at these future officers who would carry the reformed training into their careers. Most importantly, they're about integrity, doing what's right even when it's difficult, even when tradition or authority pushes another direction. Because the badge you'll earn isn't just a symbol of power, it's a promise to the communities you'll serve. As the recruits filed out, Sarah remained on the range, remembering that scorching day when a sabotaged weapon meant to break her spirit had instead become the catalyst for breaking a corrupt system. Her grandfather's words echoed in her memory. Aim true, stand firm, and remember, the target doesn't move unless you let it. She had stayed true to her target through isolation, intimidation, and threats. What had begun as a personal stand against discrimination had evolved into institutional transformation, a legacy that would shape generations of officers to come. The system that had tried to exclude her had been rebuilt with her direct input. The academy that once broke recruits who didn't fit the traditional mold now built officers equipped to serve all communities with equal dedication and respect. Sarah gathered her materials, ready to return to her patrol shift in the community that had once distrusted anyone in uniform. One conversation, one interaction, one reformed protocol at a time, she was helping rebuild that trust. The journey wasn't complete, might never be complete, but its direction had fundamentally changed. And it had all started with a broken pistol and a recruit who refused to miss her target.